What if the biggest obstacle in your life is not bad luck, not other people and not your circumstances, but something hiding inside your own mind? Most people spend years trying to improve their lives while unconsciously working against themselves. Today I am going to reveal the hidden psychology behind this pattern and show you exactly how to break free from it forever. But first you need to understand why your brain is wired to hold you back even when you desperately want to move forward. I am breaking this down into 3 core principles that explain everything. These are not just theories. They come from decades of research in neuroscience, behavioral psychology, and studying thousands of real cases. The first principle explains why success actually triggers fear in your brain. The second reveals why your emotions sabotage your decisions. And the third principle is the most powerful because it shows you the exact system to rewire these patterns permanently. Everything you thought you knew about willpower and motivation is about to change. Let me start with principle 1. Your brain is designed to keep you safe, not to make you happy. Think about this for a moment. Every single day your mind is scanning for threats. It is looking for anything that could hurt you, embarrass you, or make you fail. This system evolved over millions of years when our ancestors faced real physical dangers. A rustling in the bushes could mean a predator. Approaching an unfamiliar tribe could mean death. So the brain developed a simple rule. Anything new equals danger. Anything unfamiliar equals threat. Stay with what you know and you will survive. This made perfect sense 200,000 years ago. But here is the problem. Your brain still works the same way today. When you try to start a business, your brain sees danger. When you try to speak in public, your brain sees danger. When you meet someone new who could become a romantic partner, your brain sees danger. Not because these things are actually dangerous, but because they are unfamiliar. Your nervous system cannot tell the difference between standing in front of an audience and standing in front of a predator. Both trigger the same survival response. Research from neuroscience labs shows something fascinating about this. When people are about to do something outside their comfort zone, brain scans reveal intense activity in the amygdala. That is your fear center. At the same time, the prefrontal cortex, which handles logical thinking and decision-making, actually becomes less active. Your brain literally shuts down your ability to think clearly when you face something new. This is why you freeze. This is why you procrastinate. This is why you suddenly feel exhausted or sick or distracted right before taking action on something important. Your brain is not broken. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Protect you from perceived threats. Now here is where most people get stuck. They try to fight this response with willpower. They tell themselves to just push through the fear. Just do it anyway. Just be brave. But this approach fails again and again. Why? Because willpower is not unlimited. Studies show that willpower functions like a muscle that gets tired. Every decision you make, every temptation you resist, every uncomfortable emotion you push down drains your willpower reserves. By the end of the day, you have almost nothing left. This is why you can start the morning with great intentions, but by evening you are back to old patterns. You are not weak. You are just running on an empty tank. So what is the solution? This brings us to principle 2. You cannot control your emotions, but you can control your response to them. Let me explain what this means. Most people believe that feeling anxious means something is wrong. They think fear is a sign they should stop. They interpret discomfort as evidence that they are on the wrong path. This is completely backwards. Discomfort is not a warning sign. It is a growth sign. Every single time you expand beyond your current comfort zone, your brain will produce fear. That is its job. The question is not how to eliminate fear. The question is how to move forward despite fear. Think about learning to swim. When you first get in deep water, every instinct screams at you to panic and grab onto something. Your body tenses up. Your breathing becomes rapid. Your mind floods with thoughts of drowning. But what happens when you learn to relax, trust the water, and control your breathing? You float. The water that seemed like a threat becomes something that supports you. The fear does not disappear completely, but you learn to function effectively even with fear present. This same principle applies to every area of life. Psychological research reveals a critical insight here. People who achieve extraordinary things do not have less fear than everyone else. They simply have a different relationship with fear. They expect fear to show up when they do something important. They do not interpret fear as a stop sign. They interpret it as confirmation that they are moving in the right direction. One study tracked two groups of entrepreneurs. The first group waited until they felt confident before taking action. The second group took action despite feeling afraid. 3 years later, the second group had dramatically higher success rates. Not because they were more talented or had better ideas, but simply because they acted while afraid instead of waiting for fear to disappear first. Let me give you a real-world example. Imagine two people who want to start exercising. Person A sets a big goal. Go to the gym 5 days a week for 1 hour. Do intense workouts. Transform completely. Person A feels motivated for 3 days. Then life gets busy. They miss a workout. They feel guilty. They think they have failed. They quit. Person B sets a tiny goal. Just put on workout clothes every morning. That is it. No pressure to actually exercise. Just get dressed. What happens? Most days, once person B has the clothes on, they figure they might as well do something. Even if it is just a 5-minute walk. Some days they do nothing, and that is okay because they still achieved their goal of getting dressed. 6 months later, person B has built a consistent exercise habit while person A gave up after 1 week. What is the difference? Person B designed their goal to work with their brain instead of against it. They removed the willpower requirement. They made the first step so easy that fear and resistance had no power. This is the secret that changes everything. You do not need more discipline. You need better systems. You do not need to be more motivated. You need to make desired behaviors easier and undesired behaviors harder. The people who seem to have incredible willpower are actually just people who have designed their environment and routines to require very little willpower at all. This connects to a fascinating discovery in neuroscience called neuroplasticity. Your brain physically changes based on what you do repeatedly. Every time you take an action, you strengthen the neural pathway associated with that behavior. The more you repeat it, the stronger that pathway becomes, until eventually the behavior feels automatic and effortless. This is why habits are so powerful. A habit is simply a behavior that has been repeated enough times that your brain can execute it without conscious effort. It moves from the prefrontal cortex, which requires energy and focus, to the basal ganglia, which handles automatic behaviors like breathing and walking. Here is what this means practically. When you start a new behavior, it feels difficult because you are building a new neural pathway from scratch. Your brain has to use a lot of energy to figure out what to do. But if you stick with it, even in small doses, that pathway gets stronger and stronger. After about 60 days of consistency, research shows that most behaviors begin to feel significantly easier. Not because you have more willpower, but because your brain has literally rewired itself to make that behavior more automatic. This is why the beginning is always the hardest part. You are not doing anything wrong. You are just in the construction phase where the neural pathway is still weak and requires conscious effort. Now let me pause here for a second. I know what some of you might be thinking right now. You are wondering if this applies to your specific situation. Maybe you have tried to change before and failed. Maybe you think your problem is different or more complicated. Maybe you are worried that these principles work for other people but will not work for you. I want to address this directly because it reveals something crucial about how self-sabotage operates. One of the most common ways people sabotage themselves is by convincing themselves they are the exception. Your brain does this as a protection mechanism. If you are fundamentally broken or different, then you have an excuse not to try. You cannot fail if you never really attempt. This is actually a form of fear in disguise. It feels like self-awareness or realism, but it is actually just your comfort zone defending itself. The truth is that human brains work the same way across all people. The principles that govern behavior change, habit formation, and emotional regulation are universal. Yes, everyone has different circumstances and challenges, but the underlying psychology is identical. I had this exact thought pattern years ago. I convinced myself that my situation was uniquely difficult, that other people had advantages I did not have, that the strategies that worked for them could not possibly work for me. This belief kept me stuck for a long time. It was not until I realized that this belief itself was the problem that anything changed. The moment I decided to test these principles as if they might actually work for me, everything shifted. Not immediately, not magically, but gradually and consistently. The same will be true for you if you are willing to challenge the story your brain tells you about why you are different. This brings us to principle 3, and this is the one that ties everything together. Your identity determines your behavior more than your goals or motivation ever will. Let me explain what this means. Most people try to change by focusing on outcomes. They set goals. Lose 20 pounds. Make more money. Find a relationship. Build a business. These goals create temporary motivation, but they rarely produce lasting change. Why? Because the goal does not address the deeper issue, which is how you see yourself. Here is a powerful example. Imagine someone who wants to quit smoking. They set a goal to stop smoking. They use willpower to resist cigarettes for a few days or weeks, but they still identify as a smoker who is trying to quit. Every time someone offers them a cigarette, they have to fight an internal battle. Every time they feel stressed, their brain suggests smoking as the solution. The behavior might change temporarily, but the identity remains the same. Now imagine a different approach. Instead of focusing on not smoking, this person begins to see themselves as a non-smoker. They adopt the identity first. When someone offers them a cigarette, they do not say "I am trying to quit." They say "I do not smoke." This small shift in language reflects a fundamental shift in identity. And when your identity changes, your behavior follows automatically. A non-smoker does not need willpower to avoid cigarettes. They simply do not smoke because that is not who they are. This principle applies to every area of life. If you want to become financially successful, do not just focus on making more money. Start identifying as the kind of person who manages money wisely, who invests intelligently, who creates value in the world. If you want to improve your relationships, do not just focus on finding the right partner. Start identifying as the kind of person who communicates clearly, who respects boundaries, who brings emotional maturity to interactions. If you want to build a business, do not just focus on launching a product. Start identifying as an entrepreneur, someone who solves problems, who takes calculated risks, who persists through setbacks. Research in psychology shows that identity-based habits are significantly more powerful than goal-based habits. One study looked at people trying to vote in an election. One group was asked if they intended to vote. Another group was asked if they intended to be voters. The difference in language is subtle but profound. The second group was being prompted to adopt an identity rather than just perform an action. The result? The group asked if they intended to be voters had a significantly higher turnout. The simple shift from doing to being changed their behavior. So how do you actually shift your identity? This is where most people get confused. They think identity change requires some massive transformation or dramatic moment of enlightenment. It does not. Identity changes through small, consistent actions that prove to yourself that you are the kind of person you want to be. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you build evidence that you are trustworthy. Every time you choose a healthy meal, you build evidence that you are someone who values health. Every time you sit down to work on your project even when you do not feel like it, you build evidence that you are disciplined and committed. This is why starting small is so powerful. It is not just about making the behavior easy. It is about accumulating evidence of your new identity. James Clear, who has studied habit formation extensively, talks about this as casting votes for the type of person you want to become. Each small action is a vote. One vote does not win an election, but if you keep voting consistently, eventually you reach a tipping point where your identity has genuinely shifted. You are no longer trying to become that person. You are that person. Let me give you another real-world scenario. Think about someone who struggles with procrastination. They have a big project due. They know they should work on it, but every time they sit down, they find a reason to do something else. Check email. Scroll social media. Clean the desk. Make a snack. Anything but actually start the work. This person probably identifies as a procrastinator. They might even joke about it. "I am such a procrastinator. I always wait until the last minute." This identity makes procrastination inevitable. Now imagine this same person decides to shift their identity. They start identifying as someone who takes action immediately. The first time they have this thought, nothing magical happens. Their brain still resists. But instead of giving in to the resistance, they make a deal with themselves. I will work for just 5 minutes. They set a timer. They start. What happens? Sometimes they work for 5 minutes and stop. That is okay. They still prove to themselves that they are capable of starting. They cast a vote for their new identity. Other times, they work for 5 minutes and realize it is not as bad as they thought. They keep going. Over time, after dozens of these 5-minute sessions, something shifts. Starting to work no longer feels like such a huge battle. It becomes more automatic. Their identity has changed from someone who procrastinates to someone who takes action. The behavior follows the identity shift. This is the power of understanding how your mind actually works. You are not fighting against yourself anymore. You are working with your psychological design. You accept that fear and resistance are normal. You build systems that make desired behaviors easier. You take small actions that prove your new identity to yourself. This is not about motivation or willpower. This is about psychology and strategy. Now here is something crucial that most people miss. This process is not linear. You will have days where everything flows easily. You will also have days where you fall back into old patterns. This does not mean you have failed. It means you are human. The difference between people who ultimately succeed and people who stay stuck is not that successful people never mess up. It is that when they mess up, they do not use it as evidence that they should quit. They see it as data. They ask what triggered the old pattern. They adjust their approach. They start again. No drama. No self-judgment. Just course correction. Behavioral scientists call this self-compassion, and it turns out to be one of the strongest predictors of long-term success. People who beat themselves up after mistakes are more likely to give up entirely. People who treat themselves with kindness after mistakes are more likely to learn from them and keep going. This might seem counterintuitive. Shouldn't being hard on yourself motivate you to do better? No. Research consistently shows the opposite. Self-criticism triggers shame, and shame triggers avoidance. You want to escape the feeling, so you stop thinking about your goals entirely. Self-compassion, on the other hand, acknowledges the mistake without making it mean something about your worth as a person. This allows you to stay engaged with your goals instead of avoiding them. Let me share something personal here. When I first started learning these principles, I completely dismissed some of them. I thought self-compassion sounded weak. I believed that pushing myself harder was the answer. But then something happened that forced me to reconsider. I set an ambitious goal and failed spectacularly. My first instinct was to beat myself up, to decide I was not capable, to quit. But I remembered what I had learned about identity and self-compassion. I decided to try a different approach. Instead of criticizing myself, I asked what I could learn from this failure. I realized that I had set an unrealistic goal without building the supporting systems I needed. I had relied entirely on motivation and willpower. So I adjusted. I set a smaller goal. I built better systems. I started again. And gradually things began to work. That experience taught me something profound. Failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is part of the process of success. Every person who has achieved something significant has failed multiple times along the way. The difference is that they did not let failure define their identity. They used it as information to improve their approach. This is what separates people who eventually break through from people who stay stuck in the same patterns for years. So let me bring this all together now. You have 3 core principles. First, your brain is wired to resist change because it perceives anything new as dangerous. This is normal and does not mean something is wrong with you. Second, you cannot eliminate fear and discomfort, but you can learn to take action despite them. The key is building systems that make desired behaviors easy and accumulating small wins. Third, lasting change comes from identity shifts, not just goal setting. You become the type of person who naturally does the things you want to do. Here is how to apply this starting today. First, identify one behavior you want to change. Just one. Do not try to overhaul your entire life at once. Pick the behavior that would have the biggest positive impact if you could make it consistent. Second, make that behavior ridiculously small. So small that it seems almost pointless. If you want to exercise, make the goal putting on workout clothes. If you want to write, make the goal writing 1 sentence. If you want to meditate, make the goal sitting down and taking 3 breaths. The goal is not to accomplish something huge. The goal is to prove to yourself that you are the type of person who follows through on commitments. Third, do this every single day for 30 days. Track it. Put a check mark on a calendar every day you complete your tiny behavior. Watch the chain of check marks grow. Do not break the chain. What will happen? Most days, once you have put on the workout clothes or written the first sentence or taken 3 breaths, you will naturally do more. But even if you do not, you still win because you kept your commitment. You voted for your new identity. After 30 days of this, you will have built a foundation that makes scaling up much easier. The behavior will feel more automatic. Your identity will have shifted. You will have evidence that you are capable of consistency. From there, you can gradually increase the difficulty or add another small behavior. This approach works because it aligns with how your brain actually functions. You are not fighting against your psychology. You are using it. You are not relying on willpower. You are building systems. You are not trying to force yourself to be someone different. You are becoming that person through small daily actions that prove it to yourself. Now, before we wrap up, I want to address something important. Some of you might be thinking this sounds too simple. You might believe that your problems are more complex than this. That real change requires something more dramatic. I understand that feeling. But here is what decades of research shows. The simplest interventions are often the most effective precisely because they are simple enough to actually sustain. Complexity is the enemy of execution. When you make change complicated, you give yourself too many opportunities to fail, too many decisions to make, too many ways for your brain to talk you out of it. The most powerful strategies are almost always simple. Not easy but simple. Eat mostly whole foods. Move your body regularly. Sleep enough. Build meaningful relationships. Work on something you care about. These are not complicated, but they require consistency. And consistency requires the identity and systems we have been discussing. This is why understanding psychology is so important. It is not about learning more tactics or strategies. It is about understanding the operating system of your mind so you can work with it instead of against it. Here is what I want to know from you. Which of these 3 principles challenges you most right now? Is it accepting that fear is normal and not a stop sign? Is it building systems instead of relying on motivation? Is it shifting your identity through small consistent actions? And more importantly, which one are you going to implement first? Drop your answer in the comments below. I am reading every single one because I genuinely want to understand how these principles land differently for different people. Your insights help me create better content and also help other viewers who are in similar situations. Before you go, I want to thank you for spending this time with me today. The fact that you are still here almost an hour later tells me something important about you. You are serious about growth. You are not just looking for quick fixes or empty motivation. You want real understanding and practical strategies. That is rare and valuable. If this video resonated with you, subscribe so you do not miss next week's content. And if you found value here, share this with one person who needs to hear it. Sometimes the smallest action of sharing something helpful can completely change someone's trajectory. Next week I am diving into something controversial. We talked today about 3 core principles, but there is a 4th principle I did not include. It is about the role of pain and struggle in personal growth. Some people believe that suffering is necessary for transformation. Others argue that change can be gentle and easeful. I'm going to break down what research actually says about this and share why I think both perspectives are partially right and partially wrong. It is going to challenge some commonly held beliefs in the self-improvement world. Until then, remember this. You are not broken. You are not uniquely flawed. You are a human being with a human brain that is doing exactly what it was designed to do. The difference between staying stuck and breaking through is not about having more willpower or being more disciplined. It is about understanding how your mind works and designing your life accordingly. Small actions repeated consistently over time create extraordinary results. Not because any single action is powerful, but because consistency itself is powerful. You do not need to be perfect. You just need to keep showing up. One small vote for your new identity at a time. Start today. Pick your one tiny behavior. Make it so easy you cannot say no. Do it every day for 30 days. Watch what happens. I promise you will surprise yourself. Not because you will suddenly become a different person, but because you will realize you were always capable of this. You just needed the right approach. Thank you for being here. Thank you for investing in yourself. And thank you for being part of this community of people who refuse to stay stuck. I will see you next week. Stay curious. Talk to you soon.